We start the show with some very sad breaking news. The Irish music legend Sinead O'Connor has died at the age of just 56. She was a troubled and beautiful soul, fearless, uncompromising, shocking, courageous. She was a rebel at heart. She took on the Catholic Church. She used a primetime performance on US TV to stage a protest, even as everyone warned her it could ruin her career. Above else, though, she enchanted millions with a song that's known across the world and across generations. Few people can truly say their voice defined an era, but Sinead's did. Put simply, nothing compared to Sinead O'Connor.
Welcome to Lights, Camera, Author. I'm Jim Juno. When people hear the name Sinead O'Connor, several descriptions might come to mind. Some might call her troubled, others might call her controversial. Some of the more pious types, especially those in America, may have even more hateful epithets for her. But one thing that no one can deny is that Sinead O'Connor was one of the most talented singers of the early 90s. And to a lot of people, the image of her ripping up a photo of Pope John Paul II on an episode of Saturday Night Live in 1992 may be the only thing they know about her. But if that's the case, then those people are missing the big picture. Ariane Sherine is working to show that the Irish singer was much more than that persona in a new book entitled The Real Sinead O'Connor. And she joins us now on Lights, Camera, Author. Welcome to the show, Ariane.
Hello, lovely to be here.
Now, your new book is called The Real Sinead O'Connor. And a lot of people, they taped an intro, and a lot of people heard the intro that the only American knowledge they have of her is her ripping up a photo of Pope John Paul II on Saturday Night Live. But she was much more than that, wasn't she?
Oh gosh, yes. Yeah, absolutely. She was iconic. Uh, People think of her as that one hit, Nothing Compares to You, which was a cover of a Prince original. Um, but actually, I would say she wrote better songs than that herself. She wrote most of her own songs, other than when she was doing covers. So she did some covers albums. She loved reggae, so she did a whole album of reggae covers, that kind of thing. But she was amazing. So she got into the industry when she was 18, signed a record deal, came over to London, and her mum had literally just died in a car crash, and she had this really love-hate relationship with her mum because her mum had abused her very badly throughout her childhood, but she still loved her, of course. Sinead still really loved her mum and felt very sad, as you would, very devastated at her mum's death. And in fact, a lot of the songs that she would go on to write were about her mum, either castigating her mum or just wishing that she was in heaven with her. Um, so when she was 18, she signed this record deal, came to London, got a manager who introduced her to a lot of Black music, and she fell in love with Black music. She would go on to advocate for the rights of Black artists. She would boycott the Grammys because they didn't televise the rap category. So she recorded her first album, and she fell in love with one of the session musicians on her album and got pregnant by him. And the record company said to her, "Look, we've spent £100,000 on your album." And they got the doctor to say to her, "You know, you owe it to us to have an abortion." And she said, "Absolutely not. I'm keeping the baby." She kept the baby. She wasn't morally opposed to abortion. She would go on to have 2 abortions with future pregnancies. But she kept her son when she was 18. And I think, no, she was a little older, so she would have given birth to her son. She was maybe 20, And her first album came out when she was 20. When they shot the cover for that album, they had to shoot, like, the record company instructed them to shoot sort of from here upwards so that we couldn't see her baby bump. And in fact, they shot a different cover for the US because the UK one, she's singing and it looks like she's screaming, and that was deemed too aggressive for you guys. So
Amazing. That sounds a lot like what Elvis Presley had to go through with the Ed Sullivan Show, only shoot him from the waist up.
Oh yeah, because he couldn't, yeah, but completely different reason. He wasn't pregnant.
No, and like you said, her mother really, I mean, yes, she loved her mother, and nobody disputes that. But let's face it, her mother even taught her to steal from the Catholic, donation plate, from the
Yeah,
donation plate.
yeah, and she got her to go home from the hospital with the hospital scales under her coat, and yeah, she was bad news, her mom, but she still loved her, of course, because it's your parent and they give you life. And, you know, as somebody who had an abusive parent myself, and that's what drew me to write about her and her life, um, I know that those feelings are very complex and you can feel very, very ambivalent. You know, you still love that person despite all the terrible things that they did. So yeah, uh, and this kind of account that I've given of Sinead makes her sound like she maybe wasn't any fun. She was a lot of fun. I mean, um, after she did the record company photo shoot for her first album, she kind of locked around and did some more shots with the same photographer. Kate Garner from Hazy Fantasy, which was another band who were big in the 80s. And Sinead was wearing a t-shirt over her baby bump saying, "Wear a condom." So
Now, like I said in the beginning, a lot of people here in America remember her only from the Saturday Night Live. And when she ripped up the photo of John Paul II, first off, there was an immediate outcry here in America,
sure,
especially among the conservative religious people.
right.
Um, Amazing how the people who are supposed to be not being judging people are the most judgmental people in America. I don't know how that works, but the but really ripping up the photo of John Paul II, it was actually trying to it tied to her mother also, wasn't it?
Yes, because she felt very strongly about abuse in the Catholic Church because she had experienced abuse at the hands of her mother, and she wanted to prevent any more victims of abuse, child victims of sexual abuse. And so it came from the heart, and it was a very kind of visceral thing, an emotional thing for her. And, the response, I think, was completely divorced from why she'd done it. You know, people didn't understand. They just thought that she was desecrating this photo of this beloved figure who, as far as they were concerned, had done no wrong. Now, in Ireland, they knew about abuse in the Catholic Church about 10 years before the rest of the world. Um and yeah, she never had another hit in America. There was this outcry. She was booed at the Bob Dylan anniversary concert. Um, it was a big deal. And it came sort of hot on the heels of another scandal, which was when she refused to have the US anthem played before one of her shows. She was asked if it was okay if the anthem was played. She said she'd rather not. Um, and they got onto a radio station and made a big hoo-ha about it. And then, for like a week, radio stations refused to play her songs, and there were all these callers calling in saying she was unpatriotic. MC Hammer offered to pay for her ticket back to Ireland, and yeah.
You know, the amazing thing, and also people think that she just, you mentioned the Bob Dylan concert where Chris Christopherson introduced her, and a lot of people think she just got booed off the stage and ran off the stage in tears. But yes, she did cry at the end, but she stood up to the crowd. She basically yelled out the song "War"
Yeah, absolutely.
over
Same
the.
as she did on Saturday Night Live. And she was really courageous. And she says that when she walked off the stage, she wasn't actually crying. She said that she was being sick. So yeah, she said people thought she was crying, but she wasn't.
Yeah. See, and now that was the outcry in America. People, and actually people even bulldozed her records. This is
Yeah.
what I couldn't understand. They bought the record, okay, and then they bulldozed it. I'm like, you do know that she gets the royalties from those sales anyway, you know. But
Yeah, yeah. He said, go right ahead, buy as many as you like.
yeah, I mean that was it. That was, you know, bulldoze the record that they already paid for, you know. But that was the outcry in America. There wasn't that much of an outcry in Great Britain and London, though, was it? I mean, in Ireland, was there?
Um, so actually, I I'm not entirely sure. Um, I'm not entirely sure. That is something that I should know and something that I should have looked into, but I think because um it was televised predominantly in America, perhaps the Irish population weren't entirely aware of it because, back then in 1990, we didn't have well, I guess some people did have cable TV, some people did have Sky TV, but it wouldn't have been everybody for sure. And the chances of them watching an American
Mhm.
show would have been pretty slim, I think. Um,
And the
so
internet wasn't around then either.
of course not. No, no, no. The internet only came in sort of, you know, early adopters of the internet would have got it 96, 97 over here. So
Mhm.
yeah. And so I think they might have read about it in the papers, but I think it was predominantly a thing in America.
Now, this was one aspect of her life. She was she actually said, "I'd rather be a political activist than a pop singer."
Yes. Yeah.
Um, you know, and that to me, I mean, sounds like a very courageous thing to say because I mean, she didn't turn her back on the money, of course, but she said, "Look, I don't care if I ever sell another record in America. This is who I am."
Absolutely, yeah, she was extremely authentic and true to herself, and I think that that's why there was such an outpouring of grief when she died, because people value that authenticity and that honesty. And I don't think that there are a great number of stars who just say exactly what's on their mind. Most celebrities are understandably very guarded and they're very worried about the ramifications of what they say, and they're all PR trained, they're all media trained. Um, and that's why a lot of interviews, especially with Hollywood stars, are very boring and they're very bland because they just say what they think people want to hear. She didn't care what people wanted to hear. She spoke from the heart, and I think that that is very powerful, and it touched a lot of people.
I saw some of the interviews that she did and getting research for this interview, especially those of Graham Norton and the Late Show, and she was not apologetic. She was like, you know, this is what happened. And it turns out for the Catholic Church, she was right.
Yeah,
10 years before
absolutely.
it happened.
She was totally vindicated. But of course, I think the damage to her mental health and her psyche was done. You know, an apology, even though she was right, it didn't. it couldn't change the way that people had acted towards her at the time.
She even made the news. She sent Miley Cyrus, the American singer Miley Cyrus, when she was undergoing her younger what you want to call wild days now, and we're talking about the time that she had the song rather, Wrecking Ball out. She Sinead O'Connor sent Miley Cyrus a message saying, please be careful, please be aware that people are going to use you. And even then Miley Cyrus was like, go away.
Yeah, I mean, I can kind of see both sides here because Miley had initially said uh, that she was inspired by Sinead for the video for Wrecking Ball. Um, that she thought, that was her inspiration, and effectively saying that Sinead was awesome. And in response, Sinead was pretty horrified because she had not sexualized herself as a young singer, and she was watching Miley, naked on a wrecking ball.
Mhm.
And this is a good deal after. So this is like what, 19 years after she appeared on the scene in 1987. Miley's in and 20, oh god, no, sorry, my math is off, my math is so off. So this is 29 years after, 29
Mhm.
years after, from 1987 to 2016. And she was she said, you know, your record company is effectively pimping you and you're prostituting yourself. And those are pretty harsh words. And I felt quite sorry for Miley. And then she implied that Sinead was insane and had mental health problems, which of course she did have mental health problems, but that didn't mean that she was insane. Um, so yeah, I think, both sides were wrong in their actions. I do think that Sinead, maybe it wasn't it wasn't a helpful way of putting it. And I think that rather than write a public letter, I would have, sent it via her agent or manager or record company, to Miley privately, rather than saying, telling the world that she's prostituting herself, because no girl wants to hear that.
Right, especially a young, I mean, and let's face it, when you're a teenager or early 20s like Miley Cyrus was at that time, you think that you're headstrong, I'll say that. You think you're
Yes.
doing everything right.
And she probably felt that it was very empowering, being naked on her own terms, and uh yeah, and I suppose Sinead was probably approaching it as a veteran of the business, but also as a mum, because she would have been a mum at that point. Um, and Miley could easily have been young enough to be her daughter.
Mhm.
And, you know, I think often what's best for young people, as somebody who has a daughter myself now, who's a teenager. Um, I mean, if she's 19 or 20 and she decides to go and do that, I'll just let her make her own decisions. But yeah, I don't think it was a wise thing to do on Sinead's part, or at least I think it should have been done privately.
Well, Sinead never minced words
Oh
on
no.
anything.
No,
Yeah.
absolutely not. And
And she, go
go
ahead.
on.
Oh, I was gonna say she stood up for causes which were not popular. I mean, like back in the 90s, or early 90s, late 80s, the LGBTQ community, she stood up for gay and lesbian rights. She stood up for child abuse. I mean, these were things which were not. You just didn't do. I mean, you supported it privately, but not publicly.
Oh yeah, absolutely. She was a real trailblazer. I mean, one of the earliest things that she ever did, even before becoming famous, was an ad for condoms, which was screened. It was a fictional ad because condom ads were not legal in the UK, and it was screened on the BBC. And she kind of played this androgynous character who used condoms. And, that was a big deal. I mean, condoms were still banned in Ireland at that point. And yeah, she said, "Oh, I love doing that ad and I hope that it saved lives." Um, yeah,
And let's see, we now for those of you out there, yeah, Miley Cyrus eventually apologized
she
after
did.
Sinead O'Connor died.
She did. Yeah. She said that
A
she
lot of help,
felt.
a lot of help then. It
Well, I mean, you can think maybe she did it because she was getting bad press from it again, because that whole thing, surfaced again after Sinead died. But also she was very young and, maybe she hadn't thought about it for a while and she was older and wiser. So we can give
yes,
her the benefit of the doubt, maybe.
true. And when Sinead O'Connor did pass away 1 year ago, just over a year ago,
Yeah.
in July of 2023, people initially said, "Well, she must have committed suicide." Jumped to
Yeah.
rush to judgment, or drug overdose, or something inflammatory. But actually, it was just natural causes,
Yeah. Yeah.
COPD and bronchial pneumonia or something like that. Yeah.
That's right. I mean, she had attempted suicide many times, and her son had died a year previously. So I think it was understandable uh, to assume the worst, especially because she had a disorder called borderline personality disorder, which is a disorder I also have. And around about 10% of everybody with BPD will die through suicide. So, yeah, I think that people didn't come to an unreasonable conclusion there. It turned out to be the wrong conclusion.
Mhm.
But based on Sinead's history and based on the statistics of BPD sufferers, I think it was an understandable conclusion.
And a lot of people came out after she died and gave her tributes.
Hmm.
I liked what the singer Morrissey said, though, is that
Right.
nobody stood up for Sinead O'Connor while she was alive. And after she died, everybody is paying her tribute. And basically, he called them hypocritical.
Yeah, I mean, I think that he had a point, and I think that also he was saying that because he himself foresaw that happening with him. So he was envisioning his own death, I think, possibly. Also, given how right wing he is and some of the inflammatory racist comments Morrissey has made, you know, Sinead would probably have been horrified to, to know that Morrissey, not that she would ever know, but if she could have known that Morrissey would stand up for her in that way. I mean, to be honest, when I was researching the book, I didn't see Morrissey standing up for Sinead at any point in her life. So maybe he did, maybe I'm wrong. And if, Morrissey fans can find something that he said then in support of her while she was alive, then I'm happy to retract that. But yeah.
I would
You know,
I would think Chris Christopherson stood up for her more than Morrissey did. And again, I'll retract that also if I find out different, but Chris
yeah, I mean,
Christopherson never left her side.
he didn't, but then she kind of attacked him on Twitter later, and said that he was no hero of hers, and that they'd slept together. She said it was consensual, but that he took advantage. So, and that she did clarify that it was fully consensual, but she wasn't impressed with his behavior. I don't know what went down there, but that's what was reported.
She also, I mean, and her song "Nothing Compares to You," written by Prince. She also, in her memoir, she had some rather odd things to say about Prince, also, didn't she?
Well, yeah, they had a fist fight apparently. Um, and
I got a feeling Prince would come out on the short end of that. I don't know.
well, he was smaller than her, wasn't he? He was 5 foot and she was 5'4". So yeah, possibly. I mean, it's funny because I spoke to one of Prince's biographers and he said he didn't believe that anecdote, but then, maybe I haven't got any reason when I've been reading through all the stories about Sinead and all the research for the book, I only found one inconsistency because she said something like there had been 20 years of bad press about her. Um, but there hadn't. There had maybe been, I don't know, 13 years of bad press about her at that point. But that was the only, and as we've seen in this interview, my maths has been off, hasn't it? So, anybody can make that kind of error. But I didn't find any suggestion that she was not telling the truth about things. I think it's possible that she might have exaggerated about certain things, but I think on the whole, she was an incredibly truthful person. And often it did not work in her favor, as we've seen, but she couldn't help it. She spoke from the heart.
Now, you've written for several newspapers, including New Musical Express, Enemy, which I used to read all the time. Do you have anything? Do you have another book in the works?
Only novels. I'm only working on novels. I was going to write another biography of Hedy Lamarr and actually got commissioned, but I decided, given the amount of work that goes into writing a biography and the amount of research you have to do, I decided not to go ahead with that project. I mean, Hedy Lamarr is another fascinating character. Um, she was, as we know, she was a Hollywood golden age star, but she was also an inventor, a scientist.
Brilliant. Yes.
She's amazing, amazingly glamorous. And she had, a marriage to a guy who was a bit sus, and yeah, so it would have been fascinating telling her story, but I'm just gonna kind of focus on telling fictional stories from now on, I think.
One thing that if you came away after your research and writing of the book on Sinead O'Connor, what's the one thing you came away with?
Um, I guess it's thinking that fame is a bit of a poison chalice. I think that she was deeply miserable in a way that perhaps she might not have been had she not been famous. I mean, she led a very colorful, very eventful life. She got to, you know, become friends with stars and kind of perform at like amazing events, and she had this really big amazing life, but it wasn't a happy one. And I think it's a lesson to anybody who thinks that being famous would make them happy. I don't think it does, and I think that some people like Taylor Swift seem to be entirely cut out for fame and just kind of, let it all the well, she shakes it off, doesn't she? But I think a lot of people can't shake it off, and I think Sinead was one of them.
Well, Ariane, I'm glad that we were able to talk today. The author's name is Ariane Sherine, and the book is The Real Sinead O'Connor. Ariane, thank you for being on Lights Camera Author today.
Thanks so much, Jim. It's been a pleasure.